asked, do you have sugar cravings? He said, yes, daily. This is an indication to me that protein might need to be higher, or our blood sugar needs better balance, or we need consistent meals, something to that effect. Hello, everyone. My name is Allie Virtue. I'm the owner of Parkside Nutrition. I am a functional medicine nutritionist, and you are listening to the Pre-Diet Podcast. This podcast is my educational endeavor to teach you everything you need to know about nutrition before you hire a nutritionist. I guess I'm trying to put myself out of business, but I truly, truly love teaching people about food, how to utilize food to achieve their goals. And I think there's a lot of misinformation or certain parts of information that are greatly overemphasized on social media and everywhere. So this is my avenue to educate you and hopefully make this whole health journey thing a little bit easier. So today is actually a visual episode if you want to watch on YouTube or here on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. But I thought I would like to kind of show you some of the tools that I use, and also just some information that might be easier to see versus listen to. But you can absolutely listen to the episode. I talk through all the important points. But if you do want to, there's also a lot of information and free trainings on my YouTube channel as well. But I thought it'd be helpful to show you some of the tools that I use in this episode. One of which is the Chronometer app, or chronometer.com. And this is the app that my clients use to track their food. And it is such a fantastic tool. I can't even tell you all of the features. I know I'm a nerd about this stuff, but I promise it's pretty great. So I want to show you not really a case study, but kind of a theoretical case study. This is a real person. This person reached out about some nutrition coaching and the timing wasn't quite right for them. But I said, hey, I still want to help you out. Submit your details, fill out the short form, answer some of my questions, and I'll put together a podcast with the theoretical recommendations that I would have. Now, in this podcast, I would definitely ask that person a lot more questions. My intake process is usually about an hour, hour and a half, because I really want to get an insight into what your lifestyle is like. But I thought this would show a really good example of what are some typical recommendations you could expect from a nutritionist like myself that looks very much kind of whole person type approach, not necessarily one thing, not necessarily throwing supplements right at you the first thing. So I thought this would be a good example and hopefully help someone else with a similar goal. All right, so let's start with some information from our person. So this is a 32-year-old male, 225 pounds, 5'10". We'll call him Al for today's purposes. And his goal was to lose about 15 to 20 pounds by October 4th. And this was for a jiu-jitsu competition, making a weight class. And he wanted to do it in a really healthy, sustainable way without doing anything crazy. And he asked if this was realistic. And I said, yeah, I think you can do it, because I've definitely had clients that have lost, probably didn't have, they had weight to lose, but it's not like they had like 200 pounds to lose or 150 pounds to lose. And they were able to lose about 35 pounds in 3 months. So I was like, that's definitely doable. Obviously, it depends on how you do it. And when you have an athletic goal, obviously we really want to mitigate any, negative effects to our performance. So let's get a little bit more information about Al. All right. Person is local to me, weight loss goal. I asked, what is your typical kind of day like? And they said eggs or protein shake, but most of the time they skip breakfast. What do you typically have for lunch? Skips lunch on days that he doesn't work, but chicken and rice, broccoli is a typical meal for him. What is a typical dinner? Some protein and carbs, but depends. Snacks, if any, what do you eat? Super random things, depends on what he has at home, usually like meat sticks or something. I asked, do you have sugar cravings? He said, yes, daily. This is an indication to me that protein might need to be higher, or our blood sugar needs better balance, or we need consistent meals, something to that effect. I asked about bowel movements. I got to take digestion into account. And this is a pretty, not my usual intake, as far as like, I'm usually asking a lot more questions, but this is a form. This is just giving general recommendations to get him going. And then I asked about what current activity and exercise is like each day. So he does CrossFit, weightlifting, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he does Jiu-Jitsu 3 to 4 days a week, CrossFit 3 days a week, and strictly lifts 1 day a week. And gets about 10,000 steps or more, I think, on his work days. And then some days might be a little bit under that. I said, is there anything else that you want me to know? He's just trying to make weight for a competition, but doesn't want to cut in the wrong way. Love that. Absolutely love that. So we have his typical day here. I want to show you what those numbers might look like if he were to track his food based on what he said is his normal. So I threw this into my calorie counter, macro counter. I use the Chronometer app, highly recommend. And the website version is just so much easier as far as the visual. So I highly recommend using that as a tool, just infinitely helpful. He didn't say how many eggs, but I'm guessing like 2 to 3 typically. And that's only about like 20 grams of protein, 16 grams of fat, almost no carbs. So that's not a ton. He said that or a protein shake. A typical protein shake, one scoop is going to have 24 grams of protein. Might have two, so that could be 50. So if he started out the day with 50 grams of protein for breakfast, that would be pretty cool. But we know that doesn't always happen. He said he skips it sometimes. And then the usual kind of chicken, broccoli, rice situation for, lunch and dinner. So if that's the case, maybe we throw one more chomp stick in there. It looks like that could be, so all that tallied up, that looks like about 150 grams of protein, about 110 grams of carbs, 43 grams of fat, 1,490 calories. So less than 1,500 calories. That's not a lot. Now, if I look at a general calculator as far as like what should a human that size and that activity level be eating to like either maintain or lose weight, let's look at that. This is just some of the spreadsheets I'll use for new clients. So I punched in his stats, his age, his height, his weight, male. He's pretty active, but I lowered it just a little bit just to be a little bit conservative. So this says that he should see weight loss at just over 2,500 to 2,700 calories. He should gain weight at like 3,300 plus calories. Maintenance should be around 3,000 calories. So he's definitely well below that. I will say with the caveat, and this is nothing, no shade to any person, if we're not tracking food, usually it's hard to get a full grasp because it's really easy to have a snack here and there, a little bit more of this versus that, especially if we're not weighing our food. So sometimes we're just missing the full picture. So we have that caveat. We don't know for sure, but it does look like we're skipping a lot of meals and food isn't super consistent. So a couple lines of thought with this that we'll get into. But in general, if I were to kind of spit out macros, granted, I usually have clients track their normal and track their body weights in the morning. And that will tell me their true maintenance or what is a calorie deficit for them right now, not necessarily based off calculations. Because if someone is greatly under eating and I, put them on 2,500 calories right away, they might see some weight gain. Now, if they are really under eating and overtraining and they do legitimately need to increase their calories, I would rather do that slowly to mitigate any possible weight gain. Usually that peters out. People might gain a couple pounds, but then they kind of acclimate, they start to feel better, more energetic, etc. once they get used to that amount of food going in. But my first step is usually to track your food, get a morning body weight, and you watch that trend. Usually when people start tracking their food, they naturally eat a little bit less because they're paying attention to it. And then also tracking the body weight. If that body weight goes down, that shows me whatever you ate on average this last week, that was a calorie deficit for you. So now we know that. Or if they maintained their weight all week long and they kept their exercise consistent, that is maintenance calories for you. So that is what you need to eat every day to maintain your weight. So that is great information. If that is the case and they want to lose weight, I would take their calories that they're eating, because that's their maintenance calories, their weight stayed the same. I would subtract at least 15% of that. So that could give you your new like calorie amount. As far as protein, anywhere from 0.8 grams to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Now, if you have a lot of body weight or body fat to lose, then I might say let's go with base that off of ideal body weight or your goal body weight. So that gives you a little bit of a range. From there, you can kind of determine percentage-wise the other macros, but I'll give him some ranges and I'll plug in some ranges here, but it really is a range, and it really depends on the person as far as their health status. Do they have any issues with like type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes? Are they really athletic? This person is, right? So he does have probably a higher carbohydrate need than maybe another client that's a little bit more sedentary. So this is another sheet that I'll use. It just has a bunch of different calculators as far as like what someone's macros should be. So again, I punched in his information here. And for BMR, so basic metabolic rate, that is just you laying flat on a bed living, not any activity added whatsoever. This says that his basic calorie need is like 1,900, almost 2,000 calories per day. So based on what I just plugged in as far as his normal, he's way under that. So I would say he probably needs to have more consistent meals to build up his general calorie amount. Now, if we add a activity multiplier into that, or intensity multiplier based on his activity level, I would say he's moderately active, probably very active, but again, his calories are so low, the very active calorie amount, that I would be a little conservative to start with. And so even that still says almost 3,000 calories a day. as a range. We're not going to smack that up there just to start with, but I would start him off probably around the 2,500 calorie mark and see where that goes from there. But really, habit-wise, I would probably start with consistent meals. He has good instincts as far as what to eat. I would say the consistency needs to happen first, making sure we have breakfast, making sure we have lunch, and things like that. Because if I were to, all of a sudden say, hey, bro, you need to eat 3,700 calories tomorrow, that would be really filling and a lot on the digestion, and you probably just wouldn't feel very good. There's also the practicality of like, how am I supposed to prepare all of my food or all that amount of food all of a sudden? And that's a real human element that people forget about. But as far as a range for macros, this indicates minimum of 180 grams of protein, which is a pretty good. That's at that 0.8 gram per pound of body weight of lean mass, at least. And that would be a good minimum. I think he's already really pretty close to that. So I would try to increase that a little bit. And especially if we are trying to cut at a reasonable rate, which he reasonable but realistic. I think his rate is fine, his weight loss goal and timeline. I would increase that just to help us recover while we're still working out, we're still training, and also to send that signal of trying to maintain and hang on to as much muscle mass as we can while we're in a calorie deficit. So I would probably put that up closer, around 225 grams of protein. And that's going to be about 36% of his total calories, which is pretty good balance. And then because he is pretty athletic, he's moving a lot, I would set his carbs at anywhere between like definitely over 30%, probably closer to 40%. So that's about 225 grams of carbs out of that total 2,500 calories. And then fat percentage, probably want it to be a little bit under 30%, but some athletic populations, the textbooks will say 20% of calories. And I find that it's just kind of hard to do sometimes. You have to really watch your fat grams. So I set it at a pretty moderate 28% of calories, and that's about 78 grams of fat. And I think that's a little bit more realistic when we're looking at whole foods and we don't have to buy as much like non-fat stuff and things like that. So those are the macros I would probably recommend. All right, so let's recap as far as the macros and the recommendations. So calorie wise, I would love him to track his body weight. That's definitely going to give us a better insight of what is your true maintenance or what is a calorie deficit for you, not just based on my calculations here. But once you find your maintenance calories, then subtract 15% of that, and that is your weight loss calories. You can go more than that. You can go up to minus 25%, but you're going to feel more hungry. So I would start at 15 and start there. Because also the harder you cut, the faster you cut, we are more likely to pull a little bit more from muscle mass. So if we can start at 15% and like chill, and that feels okay, we're making good progress being, pound a week, a little bit more than that based on his goal is probably what he needs to happen, but he'll probably lose a little bit up front. And then, that rate will slow down as we get closer to that healthier body weight. All right, so we found our calories from there. From there, protein based on his weight and his performance goals. I'm going to say at least 180 grams of protein per day as a minimum, ideally closer to the 225 grams per day. Carbohydrates around 225. That's flexible. If he feels like he needs to do more than that, great. But right now, I think his carbs are probably pretty moderate to low. So I think that should be pretty sufficient. And then fats around 78 grams total for the day. And health-wise, I love to see fiber about 25, 30 grams. Also, increasing fiber is really helpful when you are in a cut or are trying to lose fat because that's going to help keep us full. So if we want to break this down per meal, and we're trying to have 3 meals a day, realistically, sometimes people need to do a snack or break up that 4th meal into 2 snacks. That way, it's just not so much food. Because if I break these numbers down into 3 square meals, that's 75 grams of protein, 75 grams of carbs, 26 grams of fat, 8 to 10 grams of fiber per meal. And that's about 833 calories per meal. That might feel like too much for this person. So if this is too filling, that's fine. My number one rule is even if I set your macros and recommend XYZ for meals, if that feels too full, stop when you're full. And we can always save it for later, have it for a snack for later, et cetera, while the body kind of builds up to that intake again. Now, like I said, if this person is really under eating and this is like way too much food for them, I would like them to take what they're eating right now. So if he is truly eating like 1,500 calories a day, I would say, hey, let's increase this 150 calories per week until we're closer to that normal quote intake, which for him, based on the calculations, would be closer to like 3,000 calories a day. But just start working that back up. Because if you're truly eating 1,500 calories and doing this amount of work and are this tall and weigh this much, etc., then we can't really cut. We're not going to cut a male of this height and activity level down to like 1,200 calories. That's just absolutely shooting ourselves in the foot there. But I also want to give some meal suggestions. So we kind of ran through what he typically eats, and I showed you that numbers wise, but I want to show you numbers wise what I would recommend for this person to eat and what their meals could look like. All right, so this is again using the Chronometer app. This is an example meal for this person. I think I broke it up into basically I have 3 meals, 4 meals-ish. Because again, I think this is going to be pretty darn filling if we start this kind of overnight. But so keeping with his eggs, let's go 3 eggs, 1 cup of egg whites. That's going to give you about 45 grams of protein in the morning. I would add vegetables in here. I just didn't get around to it. They're not going to contribute a ton of carbohydrates anyway, but you could do vegetables scrambled in with that. You could also do like a banana on the side or some fruit on the side, throw in a little extra carbs in there too, because I think I have a decent amount of rice and like sweet potato programmed and dried mango. So we could rearrange the carbs pretty easily. And then let's see, for AM snacks. So this could be pre or post workout, probably ideally more post workout. We do want a little bit of carbohydrates before training, obviously. This is probably mostly a post workout snack, but this could be 1 scoop of the whey protein, 1 banana, and then I added some dried mango for another additional carbs. So you could break this up into pre and post. That would work pretty well because it's about 500 calories, 26 grams of protein. I would actually boost that. Let me just change that to 2 scoops of protein. And then the carbs, 94 grams total. But if we're putting that before and after, that's a pretty good amount of carbs. 4 grams of fat, which is good. We want the fat low around workout times because fat sits in our stomach a little bit longer and we don't want to feel super full. And we also don't want to slow the absorption of carbohydrates and protein. That's going to help us recover, getting to where they need to be. So for a post-workout meal, low fat is pretty helpful. Also, before a workout, low fat is pretty helpful because we don't want to feel too full. And this is definitely a pro tip. If you need some quick carbs, dried fruit is great. Dried fruit is not terribly great in normal weight loss scenarios, just because, 80 grams, if you were to weigh that out, it's not that much. And it's a pretty dense source of carbohydrates. But post workout, especially when we don't have a lot of like physical stomach space to work with, or we don't have a lot of time to sit down and eat a bunch of stuff, that is really helpful for that scenario. Now, because I increased to 2 scoops of protein, now our protein goal is way over. I'm not really worried about that. This would be fine. It's not really a problem. And it's still actually pretty, because it is so lean, it's just whey protein. It's not really adding a lot of fat calories or anything like that. So we're still under our fat target that I said. Carbs are about right on point. Protein's over. This comes to a total of 2588. So pretty good there. And let's see. So for lunch, I just stuck to his basic like chicken, broccoli, sweet potato, or some sort of carbohydrate there. And again, 70 grams of protein. I put 8 ounces of chicken. That's a lot of chicken. And like I said, we are over our protein goal. So I could change this back down to a lower amount because we supplemented with a protein powder. So I could take this amount down a little bit if that seems too filling. I have a protein bar as a snack, but again, because I boosted the protein shake, we can probably take that out if needed. It's really just there if he feels hungry. That's a good option. And then same thing for dinner, chicken, some sort of vegetable, and rice. And that breaks it up nicely as well. So I'm just going to go in here and take the protein amounts down a little bit so it's actually at our targets, not over. All right, so I took the portions of chicken at lunch and dinner down to 6 ounces instead of 8. That's probably a little bit more realistic. We're kind of spacing out the protein throughout the day in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish doses. And we're way under the projected calories for weight loss, 2,400 really, but we're still hitting our protein goal, still hitting our carbohydrate goal. We're under on fats, but we're still hitting a good minimum. So 52 grams of fat for the day. That's fine. We don't usually need more unless we really need more calories. So this would be a pretty good place to start for this person. All right, so hopefully that example day made sense. As far as how I build an example day in general for someone, we want to look at our protein sources first. So plug in your protein for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and maybe a snack. Plug in, and whatever you plug in should get you most of the way towards your protein goal. The other foods that we add in might give you a little bit of protein, but those main sources should get you pretty close to your protein target for that day. Then after that, I'm going to add in my non-starchy vegetables. I didn't do that for breakfast, but add your non-starchy vegetables in about at least 100 grams per meal. Ideally, closer to 200 grams per meal is a great place to start. That's by weight. And then your starchy carbohydrates after that. Fats, we would do fats last because quite often our protein sources will fill in a lot of our fat category. So if we need to fill in more fats, go ahead and do that. And then adding some flavor. So you hopefully like your food that you picked out for yourself. As far as walking activity, I wouldn't change anything. I think it's super active. If you do need to see more weight loss, walking is the best way to do it because it's not going to spike your hunger too much, like more lifting or more CrossFit or jiu-jitsu. So definitely increase the steps if you need to see more weight loss. You could add a weight vest to this as well. So weighted walks would be a good idea if you need to. With this amount of exercise, you definitely need to be sleeping. So at least 7 to 9 hours, that is a really, really helpful way to moderate our appetite, moderate our hunger levels to make this realistic. As far as digestion, so if you're too full eating this amount of food, then we need to pay attention to having more dense source of carbohydrates. So we're probably pull back on the vegetables a little bit if we're too full, because those are going to be really filling. And so on the flip side, if you're feeling really hungry, maximize that protein. You could probably go over that. Make sure we include a lot of vegetables. So you could go up to 400 grams of vegetables, non-starchy vegetables at each meal. That is fine. That will keep us more full. And probably moderate or make sure that I'm pairing any of my starchy carbohydrates with either a fat or protein, because those are going to slow the absorption and keep me more full. All right, that wraps that case study or theoretical case study. Hopefully this was helpful. Thank you so much for watching, listening along. If you have a second, please leave a comment on the show. Please share it with a friend, follow on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you are listening, and make sure you are subscribed to the Free Shit Friday email list because I got free shit going out every single Friday. If you're already on it, thank you. Thank you so much. I put a lot of energy into that one email every week. But if you could share it with a friend, that would be also so wonderful. And I would be forever grateful. So thank you so much for listening. And if you have any other questions, let me know. But hopefully I will see you in the next one.